George Floyd's death has reignited long-running conversations about Black Americans dying during interactions with police.
No justice, no peace!
People of color have been sounding the alarm for years, but this particular case has put police back under the microscope. Statewide, Florida law enforcement still, in 2020, largely don't look like the communities they serve. Long story short, they're still super white. Let's take a deeper dive into what obstacles still stand in the way of a more diverse police force. Hear from Black recruits about what drew them to law enforcement despite the obstacles, and what one local sheriff's office is doing to hire more Black recruits than any other law enforcement agency in the Tampa Bay area. Let's see what's brewing. Hi, I'm Jenna Bourne, and I'm an investigative reporter at 10 Tampa Bay. I know this looks like Guinness, but I swear it's iced coffee. If you're new here, welcome to our caffeine-fueled homemade deep dive into issues that matter to you. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Let's start by taking a look at how racially diverse law enforcement agencies are, or, well, aren't, in Florida. According to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's data, 11% of full-time law enforcement officers in the state are Black. Compare that to 17%, the census estimate of Florida's Black population last year. Here in the Tampa Bay area, we're doing a little better. About 12% of our officers here are Black. And according to my calculations of the census estimates for our 10 counties,
Maggie, your presence is not making this any easier for me.
That matches exactly with the Tampa Bay area's Black population, 12%. But if you take a deeper dive, it really varies by city and county. Two of our area's smaller departments, Auburndale Police and Lake Placid Police, have 0 Black officers. 119 of the Tampa Police Department's 934 sworn employees are Black. That's 13%. Compare that to 24% of the city of Tampa's population being Black. The Pasco Sheriff's Office has the highest percentage of Black sworn employees, with 24%. That's 85 out of 351. We're going to come back to Pasco later in this episode. So how important is diversity in policing? This report from the U.S. Department of Justice says, increased diversity deepens trust in law enforcement, which is essential to diffusing tension to solving crimes, enables officers to more effectively and safely perform their jobs, and can make law enforcement agencies more open to reform. I've read a bunch of research on this, and long story short, there doesn't appear to yet be clear evidence that diversity decreases police violence. Researchers seem to agree that more study needs to be done on this. St. Petersburg's police chief tells me there's more to consider than just getting a law enforcement agency to mirror the population it serves.
It really involves in how the officers are doing their policing, because we don't want to go back in the past. I don't want to just put African-American officers in an African-American community and white officers in a white community. There were 12 courageous officers here, if you remember the lawsuit they had, and they tried doing that.
Chief Holloway is talking about the Courageous 12, a dozen Black officers who sued the city of St. Pete in the 60s.
We could not arrest whites. We could not investigate complaints from white citizens. We could not work in a white neighborhood. We could only work in the Black neighborhoods.
In the 1970s, the Fearless Four sued in Tampa.
Black officers were not given the opportunity for promotions or any advanced training.
And that's the key. Supporters of police reform have advocated for putting more people of color into leadership positions within law enforcement agencies so they can make decisions to improve policing. But decades after those local lawsuits, there are still obstacles standing in the way of diversity in law enforcement.
What are some of the challenges?
Recruiting challenges, trying to get people to become law enforcement officers.
And a big part of that is distrust of law enforcement in communities of color. To understand that, you have to look back at history.
Understanding the history of law enforcement in this country and the emergence of policing from forms of slave patrols, and the idea that we had a society which racialized the system of policing, where rights were entrusted to police African Americans or those of African descent. I think that if you don't tap in the diversity of society, you create and continue that system.
I talked to two recent criminal justice grads from the historically Black Bethune-Cookman University, who both tell me they got pushback from their communities and families when they decided to go into law enforcement.
They don't see us as like trying to make it better. They see us as joining the opposite side. We're not on their side. And I see it as, well, if I don't join, who's going to join?
Coming up, no one in my family really even liked law enforcement. So when I told everybody that, they was like, oh, no.
Kiefer Jefferson Grimes tells me he didn't let that hold him back. He's supposed to start the Law Enforcement Academy this summer.
I've always seen myself in a uniform. It's just something I want to do. And I feel like it's like a great career to actually help out everyone around you.
Why do you think it's so difficult still to recruit minorities to become law enforcement officers?
Because they don't feel like they would fit in. That's what I think. I think that they see it as they won't get equal opportunity. Yes, you'll have on the badge, you'll wear the uniform, but you'll never be equal with your counterparts. That's what I hear.
For the past few years, Florida's historically Black colleges and universities have been collaborating directly with law enforcement to change that, putting a bigger priority on law enforcement recruitment events and roundtable forums on campus.
I think our job at Bethune-Cookman University is to develop students that are not only strong enough to go in and change the system, but to be the leaders. They're going to be the sheriffs and the police chief. I think that's how you change the system.
And the Pasco County Sheriff tells me making sure people of color have access to pursuing leadership roles is a priority for his agency.
Every individual coming into sheriff's office is going to have the opportunity to get promoted. They're going to have the opportunity to keep moving forward and be leaders in the future.
About 3 years ago, he contracted with Greg Williams to help recruit.
More qualified applicants with a specialty in trying to identify minority applicants. And so I said, well, I can do that, but I can find the people for you, but are you going to give them a fair shake? Are you going to give them the opportunity to be successful? And he said, I sure will. So we formed a partnership to do just that.
85 of the 351 sworn employees at the Pasco Sheriff's Office are Black. That's 24%. Compare that to Pasco County's Black population, which the census estimates made up less than 7% of the county's total population last year. So what can other agencies learn from Pasco about how to diversify? Not only do they sponsor a certain number of recruits through the academy, they stand by them to make sure they stay on track.
I serve as like a mentor for them. So I track them through their academy process, through their application process, make sure that all of their documents, everything is in. And once they go through the academy, they know what to expect. And then even after they get out of the academy, they know what to expect.
I asked if the Pasco Sheriff's Office has noticed any measurable improvements since they started prioritizing diversity. The Sheriff's Office tells me it's hard to say for sure because around the same time, they started widespread use of body cameras, which they say could also affect metrics like bias complaints. And that's the thing. Racial diversity in law enforcement is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to police reform. This report, co-authored by two of the Bethune-Cookman department chairs you heard from earlier in the episode, says other needed reforms include routine implicit bias and de-escalation training of law enforcement, the charging of officers as appropriate when misconduct does occur, and the use of citizen review boards to address complaints and claims of misconduct. If there's a topic you think What's Brewing should look into, send us a tip at turn1010@wtsp.com. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss an episode, and I'll see you next week.